January 6th, 1979. Block 58, Jailing Baru, Singapore. Sometime between 6:35 and 7:10 in the morning. Inside a one-room flat on the 5th floor, 4 children are dying. The eldest, 10-year-old Tan Kok Peng, fights hardest. He fights so hard that when it is finally over, the investigators will find strands of hair torn from his attacker's scalp, still gripped in his small, clenched fist. His right arm is almost completely severed. Each child, 10, 8, 6, and 5 years old, receives a minimum of 20 slash wounds. 20 wounds per child. The number alone is staggering. But it is the youngest, 5-year-old Chin Ni, who makes the investigators go quiet. Because 20 wounds on a 5-year-old girl is not violence. It is obliteration. When they are finally still, their bodies are dragged to the bathroom and piled on top of one another, stacked like something the killer cannot bear to look at and cannot bear to leave. Then the killer walks to the kitchen sink and washes himself clean and walks out into a city that will spend the next 45 years trying to understand what happened in that flat. Before the bathroom, before the cleaver, before the city loses its breath, there is just a family waking up, a Saturday morning, ordinary in every visible way, unfolding exactly as it should. 6:35 a.m. The sky above Jailing Baru is still dark. The estate is starting to come alive in the slow, quiet way it does before sunrise. The smell of coffee drifting from someone's kitchen, the low rumble of a lorry on the road below, the ordinary sounds of a city getting ready for the day. Block 58 is one of many public housing blocks built during Singapore's great modernizing push in the 1960s. Clean lines, practical, concrete, small flats stacked neatly into the sky, each one holding an entire family and all their daily life inside 4 walls. On the 5th floor, Tan Kuan Chai, aged 38, and his wife Lee Mei Wying, aged 30, move through their flat with the careful quiet of parents who know which floorboards to avoid and how to close a door without making a sound. Their 4 children are still sleeping. There's no need to wake them yet. Lee will call home at 7:10, the same way she does every single morning, and her voice down the telephone line will pull them slowly from sleep in time to dress and eat and get themselves ready for the day. The couple have a minibus, a small school bus service that ferries other families' children to school across the neighborhood. It is modest work, but it is theirs built from early mornings and long days and not many days off. Tan takes the keys. Lee follows. They pull the flat door closed behind them. The latch settles into place with a soft click. They walk down the corridor to the lift, ride it down to the ground floor, cross the car park to their minibus. The engine turns over. They pull out into the streets of a city beginning its day. Neither of them looks back at the building. There is no reason to. Behind that closed door, on the 5th floor, 4 children breathe in the deep, steady rhythm of undisturbed sleep. Tan Kok Peng is 10 years old, the eldest, the responsible one, the boy who always answers the phone when his mother calls. Tan Cock Hin is 8, quiet and steady. Tan Cock Soon is 6, still small enough to disappear inside his school uniform. And Tan Chin Ni is 5 years old, the youngest, the only daughter, who attends the PAP kindergarten a short walk from the block, and has only recently started learning to write her own name. They are the Tan children. They are sleeping, and for a little while longer, they are perfectly safe. 7:10 a.m. Lee is somewhere on her route when she reaches for the phone and dials home. This is the ritual. Every morning, without fail, she dials. She listens to the phone ring once, twice, 3 times. Nobody picks up. She dials again. Still nothing. She tries a 3rd time, pressing the receiver a little closer to her ear, as if that might help. The line just keeps ringing into silence. This has never happened before. Kok Peng always answers. She calls a neighbor who lives in the same block and asks her to go knock on the flat door, just to check, just to make sure the children are up and moving. The neighbor walks down the 5th floor corridor to the Tan flat and knocks. Waits. Knocks again, a little harder this time. Nothing. No sound from inside at all. She walks back to her own flat and tells Lee, no one came to the door. The unease that settles in Lee's chest is small at first. She pushes it down. Children oversleep. Maybe Kok Peng took the younger ones to the playground early and forgot to stay near the phone. There are explanations, but Lee has a schedule to keep and other families depending on her. She and Tan finish the morning route. They deliver the last child. Then they turn the minibus around and head back to Jailing Baro. By the time they pull into the car park below Block 58, it is after 10 in the morning. They ride the lift up, walk the corridor to the flat. Tan Kuen Chai puts his key in the lock and opens the door. Lee steps inside and calls for the children by name. The flat is quiet, too quiet, the wrong kind of quiet, not the silence of children still asleep, but the silence of a space that feels emptied of something it should contain. She moves through the small flat. She reaches the bathroom door. She pushes it open. Lee Mei Wying sees inside that bathroom will follow her for the rest of her life. Her 4 children are on the floor, piled on top of each other on the cold tiles, still dressed in what they wore to sleep, t-shirts, underwear, as if whoever came for them arrived before they had any chance to dress for the day. All 4 of them, still gone. Lee Mei Wying starts screaming. Her screams move out through the flat, into the corridor, down the 5th floor, and out into the morning air of a city that has never encountered anything like this before. The police arrive. Officers from the Criminal Investigation Department's Special Investigation Section come up to the 5th floor and begin moving through the flat methodically. They are trained to read a room, to notice not just what is there, but what isn't, what feels wrong, what the space is quietly telling them. And this flat is telling them a great deal. The door was not broken, no locks forced, no windows smashed. There is no sign anywhere of a forced entry. That means whoever walked into this flat either had a key or the children opened the door themselves. They let someone in, someone whose face they knew, someone they were not afraid of, even with their parents gone and the morning barely started. Nothing in the flat has been taken. Not a single drawer has been pulled open. No cupboards searched. The family's few valuables are exactly where they should be. This was not a robbery interrupted by violence. Whoever came through that door did not come for money or things. They came only for the children. That was the whole purpose, the only purpose. In the kitchen, the investigators find what they have been both looking for and dreading. There are bloodstains in the sink, not large, not dramatic, just the quiet, careful marks left by someone who stood at that sink after what they had done and washed the evidence from their hands. They took their time. They did not rush. 4 children lay dead in the bathroom 20 feet behind them, and they stood at the kitchen sink and cleaned themselves with the calm of someone who had already decided how this morning would go. That detail, the unhurried washing, the deliberate cleaning, sits with every investigator on the case long after the scene has been processed. The kitchen cleaver is missing from its place on the counter. The investigators ask Tan Kuen Chai about it, and he confirms, yes, there was a chopper kept there, and it is gone. A dagger is also unaccounted for. Both weapons have been taken away. Both will be searched for in the days and weeks that follow. Neither will ever be found. Then one of the detectives crouches beside Tan Kok Peng, 10 years old, the eldest, the one who fought, and looks carefully at his right hand. The fingers are curled tightly, clenched, and inside that fist, held with a grip that did not loosen even in death, are several strands of dark hair. Not Kok Peng's own hair. Someone else's, pulled from an attacker's scalp in the final, desperate moments of the boy's life. Even as his right arm was being nearly severed from his body, even as the blows kept falling, he reached up and grabbed the person above him and pulled, and he held on, and he did not let go. His fist still holds the hair. A detective carefully photographs the hand. The strands are removed one by one and placed into an evidence bag. Everyone in the room understands what this means. There is a person somewhere in this city right now, walking around, with a patch of hair missing from their scalp. A person whose face Kok Peng saw in the last seconds of his life. But in 1979, Singapore has no DNA testing. There is no way to match those strands to a specific living person without already knowing who that person is. The hair is real evidence pointing directly at a real killer. And science in 1979 cannot take it any further. The bag is sealed and logged and set aside, and the investigators move on. The days that follow are busy with the grim work of documentation. The senior CID officers leading the case request a full pathologist's report on all 4 children. The pathologist completes the examination and delivers the findings to the investigation team 48 hours after the discovery. The officers sit down together to go through it. The The report is written in careful, clinical language, measured and professional. The kind of writing that tries to keep the reader at a slight distance from what it is describing. But the numbers in this report make that distance impossible to maintain. Each of the 4 children received a minimum of 20 slash wounds to the head and body. The investigators read that figure and look up at each other and look back down again. 8-year-old Kok Hin has the back of his skull split open. 6-year-old Kok Soon has wounds across his face. And Chin Ni, 5 years old, the little girl still learning to write her name at the kindergarten down the road, has deep slash marks across her face. 20 wounds on a 5-year-old girl is not something the clinical language of a pathologist's report can fully contain, no matter how carefully it is written. One of the senior officers reads to the end of the report, places it on the table, and walks out of the room. He stays outside for a while. Nobody goes after him. Nobody asks what he needs. They all already know, because they all feel exactly the same thing. The pathologist also notes that the children were moved after death, arranged in the bathroom, stacked. This was done deliberately. After the violence ended, someone took the time to move 4 bodies and position them together. That act, in its own way, tells the investigators as much about the person they are looking for as any other piece of evidence in the flat. Over the next several days, the investigation expands rapidly. More than 100 people are interviewed, neighbors from across the block, relatives on both sides of the family, people who knew the Tans from the market, or the school run, or the corridor outside their flat. The CID's best investigators are on the case. The newspapers have already begun covering it. The Straits Times calls it the most inhuman crime in Singapore's history. Nobody in the country disagrees. The Tans themselves, when asked, say they have no enemies. They are quiet people. They run a minibus. They don't owe anyone anything. They have not had serious disputes with anyone. They cannot imagine who would do this to their children or why. The investigators listen carefully. Then they keep asking, gently and patiently, because somewhere in the life of this family, in the small details of daily relationships and private arrangements and things that might not seem important at first, there is a reason. There has to be. Then something unexpected happens. A taxi driver from Toa Payoh walks into a police station and asks to speak to someone about the murders. He has been following the news. He has something to say. The investigators sit down with him and listen. On the morning of January 6th, at around 8 a.m., roughly 40 to 45 minutes after the estimated time of the murders, this driver picked up a passenger near Block 96 along Kaling Baro Road. The location matters. It is very close to Block 58. The man who got into his taxi was in his 20s. He had a distinctive walk, a slight lurch, uneven, the kind of gait that stays in your memory. And the left side of the man's body, the driver says, had blood on it. On his clothes. The driver saw it, said nothing, and drove. The man rode in silence to Lavender Street. When he got out and pushed the door open, the door knocked against something solid beneath his clothing. A hard, heavy knock. The driver is certain it was a knife. The man got out, did not look back, and walked away. The investigators take the driver's statement carefully. They note the time, the location, the description. Then they bring the information to Tan Kuen Chai. They describe the man, young, 20s, distinctive walk, last seen heading away from the Jailing Baro area at around 8 a.m. with blood on his clothing and a knife on his body. Tan Kuen Chai listens to all of it, and something shifts in his face. Recognition, or something close to it. He tells them who this sounds like. A neighbor, a Malaysian man in his 20s who lives in the same block with his sister. He came to the Tan flat almost every single day because his own flat had no telephone and the Tans let him use theirs. He knew the layout of the flat. He knew the kitchen, the bathroom, where things were kept. He knew what time the couple left for work each morning. He had sat in that flat dozens of times. He had spoken to those children dozens of times. He was familiar to them, comfortable, safe. The children called him uncle. The police bring him in. They arrange a formal lineup, several men standing in a row, the taxi driver brought to view them through a window. The driver takes his time. He walks the length of the lineup slowly. He stops. He points. That one, he says. That is the man who got into his taxi on the morning of January 6th with blood on his clothes and something heavy beneath his jacket that knocked against the door when he got out at Lavender Street. The identification is clear, made properly, in front of witnesses. Uncle is arrested and held for questioning. For 2 full weeks, the investigation centers on him. The CID works through everything, his account of where he was and what he did on the morning of January 6th, his history with the Tan family, anyone who can confirm or challenge his story. They search for the missing cleaver and dagger in locations connected to him. They look for physical evidence, bloodied clothing, something, anything that can place him inside that bathroom. The taxi driver's identification is solid, but it is one piece. To charge someone with murder and take them to court, you need more. You need something that directly connects the person to the crime scene. In 1979, without DNA testing, without any way to match the strands of hair from Kok Peng's fist to a living person, the physical connection is missing. And without it, the identification alone cannot carry the weight of a murder charge. 2 weeks after his arrest, Uncle is released. Insufficient evidence to lay a charge. He moves out of Block 58 almost immediately, packs up, takes his sister, and crosses the causeway back to Malaysia. He does not return to Jailing Baro. The investigators watch him go, and there is nothing they can legally do. The door that briefly opened now swings shut. Slowly, finally, the case stays open. The investigators keep working. They turn their focus fully toward motive now, because motive might open a door that the physical evidence has closed. The question they cannot stop asking is this: why the children? If someone wanted to hurt this family, why not the parents? Why aim everything at 4 sleeping children? What kind of reason grows large enough for that? The Tans keep saying they have no enemies, but the investigators keep digging into the details of the family's private life, and they begin to find threads. None of them lead anywhere definitive, but each one points toward a kind of pain or anger that, in the right person under the right pressure, might explain the bathroom on the 5th floor. One of Li Mei Wang's relatives speaks to the press and mentions the possibility of an illegal tontine, a kai, an informal rotating savings and credit arrangement common in many communities, where members pool money and take turns drawing from the fund. Sometimes these arrangements drift into gambling. Sometimes members feel cheated or owed. The theory is that someone with a grievance connected to such a scheme took their anger out not on the Tans directly, but on what the Tans loved most. The investigators follow this. 2 women connected to such a scheme are brought in for questioning on January 8th. They are released without charge. The thread frays and breaks. A second possibility moves through the neighborhood in whispers rather than open conversation. That Li had been close to someone outside her marriage, and that when she ended things or refused something he wanted, he chose the most devastating punishment he could find, not her life, but her children's. There is no evidence to support this. The Tans deny it completely, but it exists as a possibility that the investigators cannot fully set aside. A third theory involves a lottery ticket. Someone close to the family had given money to Li and asked her to buy a ticket with specific numbers on their behalf. She told them she forgot. The numbers came in. When the Tans shortly after bought their minibus, the person who believed Li had collected the winnings and kept them quietly for herself saw what looked like confirmation. The children were the price of that belief. The investigators look into this carefully. They cannot prove it happened. They cannot prove it didn't. 3 possible reasons. 3 different shapes of anger or betrayal. None of them proven. All of them heavy enough, if real, to explain what was done. But explaining the shape of a thing is not the same as finding the person who carried it into that flat on a Saturday morning with a kitchen cleaver. 2 weeks after the murders, something arrives at the Tan family's flat in the post. An ordinary envelope. Inside is a Chinese New Year card. The new year is approaching January 28th, and cards are moving between families across Singapore in the weeks beforehand. Bright prints of children playing, of good luck, of families gathered together. This card has a picture of happy children on the front. Inside, written in Mandarin, the message says, "Now you can have no more offspring, ha ha ha." It is signed, the murderer. The card is addressed to the couple using their private nicknames, pet names, intimate names, the kind used only inside a home between people who know each other very well. Not names a stranger would know. Not names a casual acquaintance would know. Names belonging to the interior of this family's life. And the line about offspring, the investigators ask Li about this directly. She tells them something that has not been shared publicly until this moment. After the birth of Chin Ni 5 years ago, she underwent a sterilization procedure. She cannot have more children. This was not known outside a tight circle of family and trusted friends. It was private, the kind of thing you share only with people you have let all the way in. The person who wrote this card knew about it, perhaps had known for years, and chose this moment, 14 days after killing her 4 children, to use it as a weapon, to make sure she understood that whoever did this knew her life, knew exactly what they had taken and exactly why. The investigators take the card into evidence. In 1979, lifting reliable fingerprints from paper is not straightforward. The handwriting cannot be matched to anyone without a comparison sample from a known suspect. The card tells them everything about the kind of person they are looking for: local, intimate with the family, deliberate, completely without remorse, confident enough to taunt the police in writing, and gives them nothing they can use in a courtroom. The murderer has sent the investigation a message that says, "I did this, and you cannot touch me." And so far, they are right. The months that follow are filled with continued interviews, new appeals, fresh tips that arrive and are checked and go cold. A man comes forward claiming he saw a couple covered in blood near the block on the morning of the murders. This account falls apart under scrutiny and cannot be verified. Another witness report surfaces and also comes to nothing. More than 100 people have now been spoken to. The best CID investigators in Singapore are on this case. The country is watching. The country is waiting. No arrest comes. January 1980. 1 year after the murders, the Straits Times sends a reporter to speak with the Tan family. They are still in the flat, still on the 5th floor of Block 58. They cannot afford to leave, and perhaps on some level, they cannot bring themselves to either. The minibus is gone. They gave up the business not long after the murders. Driving other people's children to school every morning was a shape too close to the life they used to have. They work now at a factory that makes plastic bags. Long hours, simple physical work, something to fill the days with motion and noise. When the reporter asks Lee Mei Wying what the flat feels like now, she pauses for a moment. Then she says, 4 walls of emptiness. They have registered with the Social Welfare Department and expressed a wish to adopt children. They want the flat to have children in it again. They are waiting for a match. They are always waiting now. 4 years after the murders, Lee Mei Wying has a procedure to reverse the sterilization she underwent after Chin Ni was born. Against the odds, it works. On December 30th, at the age of 35, she gives birth to a healthy baby boy. The Straits Times reports it. Singapore reads it the way a city reads news it has been quietly hopping for without quite knowing it. A new child in the flat on the 5th floor. A new voice in the 4 walls. The family will later have a daughter too. What was empty slowly, in its own time, begins to fill again, not in a way that replaces anything. Nothing replaces anything, but life comes back the way it sometimes insists on doing. 2004. 25 years after the murders, the Singaporean crime show True Files produces an episode recreating the case. A generation of viewers who were not alive in 1979 encounters the story for the first time. 2021. The advocacy group Crime Library Singapore raises the case during a public awareness campaign and makes an appeal to anyone who lived in Block 58 in January 1979, to anyone who knew the Tan family, to anyone who observed something that morning and never told the police. An elderly resident of the 5th floor responds quietly. What this person shares with the CLS team includes details that were never made public in 1979. Things seen or heard on that Saturday morning that were never passed to investigators. Things kept private for over 4 decades for reasons that time and habit have made hard to explain. The Shin Min Daily News follows up on the CLS findings and eventually reaches Lee Mei-Wying. She is in her 70s now, living with her grandson. Tan Kuen Chai has passed away. He died without ever seeing the case solved, without ever knowing whose hair his son held in his fist on the bathroom floor. When the reporter tells Lee that new information has come forward, that people from the block are finally speaking, Lee goes quiet for a long moment. Her eyes fill. She nods when asked if she hopes the case can still be solved after all this time. She says she will leave it to the authorities. She says nothing else. There's nothing else. What more can be said after 42 years of saying it in silence every single morning when you wake up? Block 58 no longer exists. It was demolished years ago as part of Singapore's urban renewal program, replaced by a newer building. The 5th floor corridor where neighbors passed each morning is gone. The lift is gone. The flat itself is gone. The kitchen, the sink with the bloodstains, the bathroom where 4 children were found. The walls that knew everything have been turned to rubble and cleared away. Whatever physical traces the killer left behind were demolished along with the block. The place where it happened no longer exists on this earth. What remains is a case file inside the Singapore police force. A sealed evidence bag containing several strands of dark hair, pulled by a dying 10-year-old boy from the scalp of the person who killed him, sitting in a forensic archive somewhere in this city, waiting for a technology that did not exist in 1979 and somewhere in Singapore, in Malaysia, or wherever the years carried them. The person who walked into that flat on a Saturday morning in January 1979 has been living a life. They were in their 20s then. They are in their 60s or 70s now. They have had decades of ordinary days, meals, conversations, perhaps a family of their own, nights of sleep, all of it built on top of a Saturday morning that 4 children did not survive. The case is still open. The hair is still in the evidence bag. And somewhere, in a city that has never stopped looking for an answer, a fist is still holding it.